Hey everybody, welcome back to episode 2 of the Councilcast. My name is Craig Reeves. I'm a district councillor here in Wychavon, and I'm joined with another district councillor, Charlie Homer. How are you doing, Charlie?
I'm very good, thank you.
Are you ready for this episode? This is the big one.
I'm all in for the second episode.
This is the Riverside Shopping Centre. Now, I want to kick this off with the fact that this centre has been the most talked about, neglected, I would say, as the Daily Mail, as very rarely I would agree with the Daily Mail, as one of the saddest spaces in the country. And it has been for a long time, and I'm so grateful now that we've welcomed the news that Wychavon have quite recently purchased the space. How do you feel about that?
Well, I've lived here a little bit longer, so I kind of remember when it was actually quite a vibrant centre, and all of the shops were full with different offers, and we had high street brands in there. Marks and Spencer's and like Next, Burton's, all these, it was a full centre. There was quite a few independents in there as well at one point. It was a really vibrant space, and that's where you'd go shopping on a Saturday morning, ready for the night out sort of thing. You'd go out in spoons, and there'd be about 4 or 5 other people wearing the same shirt as you because they'd all been into Next that day. But yeah, I mean, there's no getting away from the fact that the centre has been an absolute blight on Evesham for the past few years. I mean, probably that's been kind. It's been a number of years, unfortunately. It's been in a systematic decline, and more recently with the owners who have basically given it absolutely no regard. It's been dirty, filthy, even unsafe maybe at times as well, with some of the things that have been going on in there. So yeah, I think it is absolutely welcome that it's now in public ownership, and that we're taking plans forward for what we want to see happen there. I mean, the thing about the Daily Mail and all these other things, there's been a few YouTubers doing stuff. Don't get me wrong, look, the centre was really bad, but I do really loathe like this clickbaity type nature of journalism. Let's go and find something and run it down and forget the context or anything else. That stuff, it has a legacy, it stays around forever. And I think that's a bit sad, really. But, I understand why it happened. And I understand why people, it got people sort of talking, and, we were all upset about it. But equally, Craig, I think, I did a video, one of our first ever videos last summer, when that news had come out, and then literally The Guardian had said Evesham is one of the best places to live in the country. So it can't all be bad.
No, I mean, yeah, the wider town, I think, is really brilliant. And as I said in the previous podcast, it's the centre of the town that I think other people that visit our town will associate with the look and feel of the place. So if people are coming to Evesham, and they're going to come to the Battle of Evesham, and they're going to see the whole of our town centre, and they walk through that shopping centre, the impression that they're left is like a dementor, is what I called it. It was sapping the life out of the space, sapping the life out of the surrounding areas as well. And the longer that it went on, the more it was affecting the well-being of the town, and of course the businesses that surround it. You talk about clickbait and stuff, and I totally agree with you. I mean, it's never great when the Daily Mail, national newspaper, are going to report that your town's basically a dive, and you see these YouTube clips going out as well. I mean, I was guilty as well, of course, of talking about the space. It's hard, I think, when people don't understand what's going on. And at the time when I first arrived at the town, I was shocked, actually, about how bad that shopping arcade looked and it felt. And I was more shocked then with what felt like silence that surrounded it. And so obviously there's two things that play here. The one is that the council don't have a silver bullet to remedy absolutely every problem in any town. The council are not the all-seeing eye that can just wave a magic wand and fix something. But of course, they're always the first port of call when there's a problem. What are you doing about it? And I came here and I said, what's happening about it? And the response was, oh, well, we've put pressure on the owners to do something. Now, that for me felt hopeless at that time. I just moved here with my 2 young kids and just put all my savings into this house, and felt like, oh, there's nothing happening with this then, and it looks terrible, and it clearly has detrimental effects to the rest of the town. what have I done? And also I spoke to a number of people whilst I was then campaigning, as I'm an independent district councillor for the election that I won. For the record here, Charlie is a Conservative councillor. People were selling their houses because they thought the town had gone that south, that far, not south as in Kent, but downhill. And it was really alarming because, yes, people can be a bit down. Some people can be a bit loose-lipped with, where they live sometimes, especially if they've lived there their whole life. And, it's easy to say, oh, yeah, it's crap where I live, isn't it? It's rubbish because, you like you said in the past, you're hard on the things you love the most. So it is easy to sometimes fall into that trap. But I feel with the Riverside, it was a really justified reason to have a problem.
I mean, look, I think it's always interesting when you're campaigning on the doorstep and the things that you hear. Absolutely, you need to listen to that. But I mean, like all of us, we're listening to that all the time. Often people like to express their feelings about things, and that's what we're here to do. We're councillors. We're meant to listen to those things. So, I'm not trying to sit here and go, everything's fine and we shouldn't be so upset because it's not that bad. That's not the situation. I think it's always interesting when people say they're selling the houses because the town is so awful, and then I always think, well, if those houses are being sold, people are buying them. This idea that everyone's leaving, I always take that with a pinch of salt. Maybe that it feels easy to sort of say that's the reason, when I guess there's other things at play too. But I mean, look, really, probably in terms of the centre and the shopping centre, it's been on the agenda for ages. It got thrust into the sort of public forefront last summer with the Battle of Evesham, when it was, I think, a pane of glass had fallen, or something had happened in the centre, that a piece of glass had fallen or something. And there was basically at one point, I called, and so did the council, called on the owners to basically, can you just close the centre for this weekend where we're going to have 60,000 people coming to visit? They don't know. When they Google what else can you do in Evesham, a shopping centre, and they walk up and they see what looks like the remnants of the Battle of Evesham, frankly. So it is, would you do that? And they basically said no. And we had to really, we got very, there was very, very frank conversations about the fact they needed to tidy it up and clean it up. And basically at that point, the council also stepped in and has done over a number of occasions in the previous years and tidied up part of their estate. I mean, we can't, we've moved on now. It's not in their ownership anymore. It's our responsibility now. And maintaining that space is something we need to do whilst there are still shops there and whilst it still looks publicly accessible. We need to keep it. There's that balance, of it needs to be clean and tidy versus it can't be spotless, because ultimately in a few months' time we're going to knock it down. So, and this is what we always have to contend with. We are spending, people's money. This is money that's been entrusted to the council to do the best things for the area. So we always have to, we have to treat that with absolute priority when we come to look at these solutions and things that we do. I think the sort of like you've expressed, maybe the quietness or the sort of what was perceived as silence around the shopping centre was generally that it's a really difficult thing to procure a centre like that when you've got a single landowner, single property owner, because as soon as they know that the council want it, they can start to do things like, well, they could start to apply some political pressure, which means it's really difficult then for us not to buy it, and also not to buy it at probably quite a conflated price. Thankfully, none of those things happened. The price that we paid for the centre and all the other things that went into that, and the fact that we worked with New Homes England to purchase the centre, etc., that means that we definitely paid a fair price for it. I mean, we can argue about fair all we like, but ultimately there is, there's calculations out there for what should you pay for a piece of estate in this part of town, et cetera, and we had to follow that. We had a massive survey conducted on the property as well, which was also determined the value. So we did lots of due diligence before we finally went ahead and did it. There's been many false starts on that as well. We talked to other people before about what could we do, how could we do it. COVID hit just after those conversations had started, and that sort of like sidelined everything. Okay, fine, we can't blame COVID for everything, but I think we can all accept that COVID was a pretty big disruptor to the way things are done in this country, or not, globally. But here we are. We do own the shopping centre, and as my sort of, the leader of the council, Richard Morris and Emma Kersey would say, who have sort of led on the charge with this and seen it over the line, is we've got to stop looking at it as a shopping centre and seeing it more as an opportunity for the fact that now we own this piece of land or this area, we can do something about it and we can start to unlock the potential of Evesham. And that's the position that we started from. And that event we had a few weeks ago in the town centre, at the town hall, we had, there was hundreds of people that came through the door there, hundreds of people that completed the survey online to say what they want to see and how they want to see it. And actually, I think the sort of relief was palpable. Finally, we own it. I mean, some of the messaging that we had to distribute on that night, it's going to take time. Demolition is not going to be something that happens overnight, and it has to be done really sensitively because of the fact that it's next to a grade 2 listed building, and it's got, there's areas of historical significance. And also it's in the middle of a town centre close to residential areas. So when you come to demolish buildings, you've got to be really careful about how you do it and how it's done to minimise disruption, etc. So, typical councillor speak there of me saying, please bear with us whilst it takes a little longer than you'd expect it to. And no doubt there's people there go, well, give us a weekend and we'd have it cleared up. But unfortunately, that's just not how it works.
I mean, should we just call the podcast there? I think you've just said everything that needs to be said, right? Very detailed. Let's try and let's see if I can go back.
Oh, right. Sorry, have I given too much of an explanation?
No, you've given a very good explanation. I think really going from my starting point, of campaigning and hearing those things, to where you've just got to now, is that a lot has happened, but a lot has been communicated in that time frame since. And at that point, we're talking about a good 7 or so years, really, where I feel that the town had felt the decline of that space. And there wasn't any communication, as you say, because of confidentiality and all the reasons, from leveraging a price point and what have you. Like, it makes absolute sense. I remember walking through, having been elected, signing a bit of paper with the chief exec, all the confidentiality councillor stuff. And the pen hadn't even come off the paper, and they were like, "So, Riverside Shopping Centre, we're buying it." And I was like, "What? What? You're buying it? We need to tell people quick." They're like, "Well, we can't tell anybody because confidentiality." And I told the story about the people on the doorstep, and how, it matters to people that this space is so neglected, and of course it's not neglect of the council; it's neglect of the private owners that have had it over the course of its time. So, what can we do to bring about hope, basically, that there is hope for this area to transform? Now, I'm not saying it was anything to do with me having these conversations, but a few weeks thereafter, there was a full council meeting, and at that full council meeting, I believe it was you that asked the question, and in return to what is happening with the shopping centre, the response was, it wasn't we are buying it, it was we're working with the owner to bring it into new ownership at that point, which then later became public ownership. So the story at that point was starting to unfold, and I was elated because it meant now that we could talk about the hope that the space has, which we couldn't do before or didn't feel existed. And that hope brings about hope for the residents that live in the town. It brings about hope for the businesses in the town. It brings about further investment in the town as well, because people will think, oh, well, if this is going to become something bigger and better, then obviously now's the time to invest in the town, because, all of these vacant shops that we're seeing in the high street right now at a price point might be inflated when we start to see designs and when we start to see the space really, come about. So, jump on the investment now. I do think actually we've seen a bit of that. We're definitely seeing the vacant shops gain more interest. There's some that have been filled already by independents, and that's fantastic. So I think that narrative that started at that point when you asked that question at the full council was really, for me, the building blocks for where we're at now. And I think what's really important, without trying to get too ahead of myself, but is that the communication and bringing people in on this story, really, of how this space is going to change is really important. It's one thing that I keep bringing up a lot at meetings and what have you, is that we really need to keep the communication up. We need to bring people in on this. Just jumping again to the bit about cleaning that you mentioned, we obviously purchased the space as a public body, and there are plans which aren't set in stone yet. We haven't got images of what this thing's going to look like. There's no architect drawings. All we know is that we're going to need to knock it down to rebuild something new. The time frame that's going to take between now that we've purchased it to knocking it down is not going to happen overnight. We've also got the fact that this centre has been historically grubby. Pigeon poo, there has been vomit, empty Costa cups and other drinks brands strewn all over the floor. What has become very apparent is that once it's now had its deep clean, which was a number of weeks after the purchase, is that it does get grubby again quite quickly, and so I think it's trying to manage the expectations of how clean are we going to keep it moving forward. It's not going to be pristine. We gave it the deep clean. Everybody was banging their hands on the table. We need this centre to be clean. It's disgusting. It got cleaned. It was called a deep clean. I think.
I mean, it was a 3-day clean. It was quite deep. It might, from a standing point. It's a complicated one, but it was a deep clean. It took 3 days to do the clean. That's pretty deep on my sort of.
It was never going to be 100% clean. There was always going to be the chewing gum that was going to be really impossible to get off the floor. But then, like other people have said online, what is the point? And you've just said yourself, what is the point in cleaning it to be pristine and maintaining that when it is going to be knocked down? We've got currently Home Bargains and one charity shop in there at the moment. The thoroughfares are open.
On-site advocacy, isn't it? It's just like two. It's Imagine on-site advocacy and Home Bargains. I mean, just to come in on that, how clean was it going to be? Deep. It was a deep clean. I don't think anybody was being infatuated about that. And the fact is, it needed it, and it meant that it was much more than just. I think before any cleaning is just pretty much focused on floor level, and it was about trying to tidy up in general. I think Councillor Stokes and there was a press article about after the clean, and Emma sort of said it in quite a good way. I can't remember a word, so I'm paraphrasing. But ultimately, that we have to balance it up between we're going to knock it down. We need to keep it tidy. We need to keep it clean, but there is a balancing act, and that's because we're spending taxpayers' money on doing that. And ultimately, of course, we don't want it to get back into the similar state. It goes to show how much of a thoroughfare it is, for the fact that actually only after a few days, even a week or so, it was already in a pretty poor condition. But it also just goes to show, unfortunately, how disrespectful people are in general to a space like that, where rubbish is just thrown on the floor or not picked up. Now, don't get me wrong. There's lots of psychological sort of theories around if it looks messy, then people don't want to take ownership and don't see pride in it, so they it's an easy thing to contribute.
Theory.
Idea. It's easy to contribute, but ultimately, thank God we've got people like Anti-Litter Evesham and all those people that go and do the things that they do. But if everyone who had litter was just responsible for their litter, we'd be answering most of society's problems. It's not the world we live in, and I think 95% or 99% of everybody probably does exactly that. Takes it home, does or disposes of it properly. But there are unfortunately a few people that don't. Now, I'm not going to blame the whole situation on those few people that don't, because that would be silly. Ultimately, it was in a really poor state and needed a really good clean. That has happened, and it's right. It's right that we're held to account, and so we're all held to account. But I thought that piece from Evesham Journal was a little bit disappointing in the sense of it wasn't looking at the bigger picture. It didn't feel very fair in the grand scheme of things in terms of, look, the story is we now own it. We've cleaned it to a certain standard. It's not going to be, I wouldn't suggest anyone goes and eats their dinner off any shopping centre floor, whether that's the Boring or the Riverside Shopping Centre. But, we have to, there is a balancing act. It's a fine line that we have to tread. And I think, I saw the comments, and there was for everyone who said it was disgusting and needs to be cleaned further, there was another one who said, why are we spending money on it? It's a waste of money, you know.
Some of those people were the same people. That's what I couldn't quite get my head around. It was like, this is disgusting. You've owned it for, you know, a few weeks now, and why is it not been cleaned up yet? Followed by, well, why are we cleaning it? Because, I mean, I replied to, I replied to the Evesham Journal, basically saying, like, the council here, Wychavon, are in a rock and a hard place, right? This space will not be open forever, right? Because we now own it. I mean, we're working. Well, I say Wychavon are working to close the thing. You know, we need to move those businesses out, right? So there is a balance. I mean, you said the word balance just then. You know, we've got to have a balance of, yes, we don't want anybody falling over on pigeon poo, you know, but also we don't want to be, you know, cleaning it to eat your dinner off. And so it's a bit like, I suppose, bear with us a little bit and, you know, and lean into more of the hope and the prospects of the place rather than just trying to be cynical for cynical's sake because the council, you know. And also something that comes up a lot here is the commercial factor, you know, and versus the public factor. And yes, if you were a relatively successful shopping arcade and you had a situation where a thoroughfare was looking pretty bad, you'd probably go to a lot of expense of, you know, boarding it up and making what looks neglected improved, you know, from a visual point of view, for the sake of the other businesses. Now, the shopping centre as an entirety does very little for the surrounding businesses. And as a public authority, now that it is owned by that public authority, they do have an obligation to ensure that obviously the surrounding areas, you know, are at least affected by this space. For me, that means shutting the doors down and working our backsides off to try and get the businesses that are currently in there out of there so the doors can be shut, because there's no way you can polish that.
Well, and that,
you know, I'm not going to use the expletive. You can't polish that turd. You know, it needs to be shut down.
But I think that, you know, that's absolutely the premise. Those are complicated conversations, though. You know, and you're talking to national brands trying to find them similar locations or to relocate. There's contracts, there's legal services included. It's a protracted thing, unfortunately, and none of those conversations could really be had until we owned it, because you know, it doesn't mean anything until you own it, does it? We could say all day we're going to own it. Could you move out now? And if we didn't, then what would be the situation? And
add on top of that as well, by the way, that of course there is a business in there that is an employer of people that obviously live in the town and work there, and they're worried about their jobs because obviously shopping centres now been bought out by a council. Well, what about my job? You know, and then you've got that conversation. Well, haven't your management team or anybody, you know, giving you any briefing? I mean, because, you know, we're only seeing what we're reading online here, and it gets sensitive. And again, it's a balance between, you know, a rock and a hard place here, because we don't want to see people out of jobs. We want to see this business move to another location in the town. We can't keep the Riverside Shopping Centre and all that it doesn't do for our town for the sake of one business. I think essentially that's what this comes down to. But of course, you know, people get very vocal, and when the council are involved, it's almost like there's more passion in those responses.
Well, I think it's, you know, again, it's that sometimes it's like what we said last time. You know, the bloody council. Well, what is the bloody council? You need to unpick all of that. There's quite a lot of stakeholders involved on that particular site. You've got businesses, and, you know, you've got landlords, you've got, you know, there's just a lot to unpick there, and it takes time to unpick it. And maybe it would be quicker in a commercial world, but, you know, in a commercial world, maybe the same things wouldn't be considered. And actually, you know, we've come at this from a point of, we want to bring everybody with us. We want to ask for people's opinions. We want to make sure that we're being sensitive to the surrounding areas. You know, you talked about boarding it up, and, you know, ultimately, if that centre had, say, there was more occupancy of that centre, and we realised it was going to take 2 or 3 years to sort of, you know, responsibly take people out of there, hopefully place them in other vacant units around the town, it would just take time, then I would be the first one, and I think you would and others would be saying, right, well, then let's see what we can do to enhance that centre for the time being. Understanding, it's going to be money that, you know, ultimately is only going to have so much of an impact, but it will have a positive impact for the time that it's up there. So that's why, you know, that event that we had in April 16th or 17th, there was a big conversation around the hoarding that's going to be around the demolition site, because we understand that demolition is going to take time, and we don't want to just see, like we've seen with the Roundhouse, just a load of scaffolding and Harris fencing, and sort of, you know, it doesn't look great. You don't want it to do that. So the recognition there is already that we can do something positive around that. And how can we involve everybody and make sure that we get something up there that, albeit it's temporary, but it's going to look better than it would do if it was just literally Harris fencing and some sort of, grey shrouding that went over it. So we are trying in that sense to make sure that we protect the amenity of the town for the duration of the demolition. The reality is despite the amount of pain that's been caused by the Riverside Shopping Centre, we have to go through a bit more until we're going to get to the point where we can all stand back and hopefully be happy with it. One thing that I can say, and it's a hill that I'm willing to die on, is I do not want to see something which is a short-term solution to a long-term problem. And that is it basically, in 30 years, we look back and go, oh, we missed the opportunity there. We didn't do what we could have done, or we scaled it back, or we didn't push hard enough, etc., etc. But the other reality is, and once we own it, we've been really honest about we need to find a partner. We need to find a commercial partner to come in who's done this sort of thing before, rejuvenated these sort of sites before, because there are lots of examples out there in the country where that's happened. Specialist companies working with councils and communities to make that happen. Again, all of it, though, will be a compromise. There will be things that we don't get and there'll be things that we do get, and there'll be things that we wish we had and things that, unfortunately we won't have. Me and you have had this conversation before, and I think sometimes maybe we differ on it slightly. I'm more of I think maybe you can come back on this if you don't agree, but I'm a bit more for sort of free market. I think you have to create the opportunities for people then to come in and take those opportunities on. I know that you are particularly keen on seeing a Nando's in some sort of vicinity of Evesham,
not only a
centre,
Nando's,
but some sort of chicken related restaurant in the centre of town. You'd be happy, man. But the reality for Nando's is they've got really particular considerations when they're thinking about what's going to go there. What commercial unit would they want? How they access it? All this sort of stuff. So. But that all has to come out in the mix. And the reality is as we know, these types of premises or these type of operators, they're making really very fine-tuned commercial decisions about where they will go and place their businesses in the future. Equally, I'd like to see more independence. I want to see, I do want to see a mix of leisure. I think leisure is the thing that I would push for. I think residential is crucial because you need that. That's part of the mix. It has to be in there to make that a sustainable, viable site. But that doesn't mean that it has to be, we have to be unimaginative about what we can create there. And, that's going to be that type of property there, looking across the park, across the river. That's some of the best houses you could, what an amazing view you could have from a home there. So it's prime development land. So I think it is an unfortunate reality that we're still not quite where we want to be, but we definitely have an idea of where that is, and we have now more than ever before a more firm timeline on how that's going to be. Now that might, it's going to sweat a little bit, I guess, over time. It's one of those projects. It's a big project, and we've got the hell of the big thing from local government reorganisation that's looming over us. But that's why Wychavon's working at pace to try and make sure that, again, with the legacy that we put in place, is that we've got this to a really good situation for whoever does then take over in terms of local government. It's a project that, oven baked, ready to go, commercial partner lined up, the site's been demolished, plans have been drawn up, all that sort of stuff. Community's been engaged and involved. You couldn't ask for more than that if you're going to kick off a project, than if you're going to come in as a completely new entity and try and do it all over again.
I mean, going back to your, if the council were commercially minded, the problem we've had, of course, is the fact that the site has been very commercially minded over the last decade, and it's clearly amounted to nothing. It's just amounted to a big neglected space, and that's why I think it's really important that we recognise that what we do now is really key, and to bear with Wychavon whilst we navigate these early stages. It is still very early stages. A lot of youngsters I say youngsters because I'm old. A lot of the youth on TikTok in particular, whilst, leading up to the announcement and providing regular updates on what's going on with the deal or what we would like, have been very vocal about wanting it to remain as a shopping arcade, which I think is really interesting because they're obviously of a generation where digital and online purchases are part of their life. It's not something that's been brought into their life. They've been brought into that world, and they're craving for something tangible. I unfortunately have to go back and say, look, if this Riverside space was going to be a successful shopping arcade, it would still be one. You know, it was a very good national offering for such a small town. And when national retailers were pulling out across the whole of the country, I think the scale of Evesham and how, you know, small it is really comparable to other market towns, was the first to suffer, and of course had the longest to suffer. But I would also say that we're now ahead of the curve compared to other towns, because we've got a solution now. Whilst other towns are still suffering and seeing those national retailers pull out, we're seeing national retailers pull out. We're seeing a lot of independents coming to the town, but we're also now going to see this space regenerated. And what I think is also interesting here is based on the fact that national retail has evolved, gone to the out-of-town retail parks, gone online, is that the only way this has really become viable from a business point of view, let alone an authority's point of view, is that there is grant funding coming in from Homes England, which is putting up a substantial sum for the help of the purchase of the site. That means there will be residential element to it. And some of the comments that I have seen is obviously, we don't want any residential, the council don't care. Okay, well, if the council didn't care, they wouldn't have bought the space, and it would just still be an absolute dementor of a space doing its thing anyway now. And probably what would happen in the future at some point is a developer would buy it and just put housing there. And of course, another factor here to consider is the fact that the council can't always say no to something, because we have national planning infrastructure. We have figures that local authorities need to hit locally for housing, and sometimes arms are bent based on the legalities of that and what developers are putting on the table. So really what we're doing here, buying it as an authority, is yes, there is a residential element to this, but we're going to make the best of that situation. And it means that we can support the purchase of the site. We can provide some really great offerings from a residential point of view, and it will prop up the fantastic retail, hospitality and leisure offering that the space will have. And so people have gone online and said, what's the point in asking us the question? We already know the answer. It's going to be housing. Well, it's not going to just be housing. It's going to have all of the other offerings that we're seeing in successful towns and cities. And I would like to see the space regenerate in a way that is unique, that leans into our heritage and the character of the town, provides something new, reattract some national brands, like you mentioned, Nando's. And for me, Nando's it's a bit of a generic metaphor, really.
You've got a song about Nando's, haven't you?
I did put a song out about Nando's, yeah. If you check out my social channel, I did make a song about bringing Nando's to the town. But it's about, for me, it's about bringing that demographic of people in that would visit a space because that national brand is there. That national brand comes with marketing. It comes with an appeal and attraction. Come to the town, and when they're here, we've got Stir Ups, great burger, independent burger joint.
But I think
what you're
also talking about is also about experience. So actually what we're looking to do is create an experience. People want experiences. And I think that's the same for any generation. I absolutely agree, though, because I'm no longer a young person and can't be classified as that anymore, that we do need to make sure, I've still got my hair, but we absolutely need to make sure that younger people are included in decisions and that's sort out. I think at the engagement event, someone came up and I think there was a bit of feedback about, please going out and talk to schools, go and speak to at least the 2 high schools and just see what the students have to say to you. And I think that's we definitely need to get that perspective. But the thing that I think is important is you're talking about how do we create an experience which people want to come into the town and use. Now, for everything that I know, and I'm a complete layman at this stuff, is one thing that I know that would benefit the town greatly. It's just the fact knocking that place down and actually be able to see the river and the park from the centre of town. At the moment, it's completely blocked off. You know, you wouldn't know. Like I say, if you dropped a Martian in the middle of in middle of Evesham and just told them to walk in a straight line in one direction,
I reckon I've seen that person. I've seen that Martian.
They wouldn't. You know, you could easily walk around Evesham for 20 minutes and never know behind those big buildings or just through that courtyard or that alleyway is a beautiful park and a river. You could easily do that. Now, I mean, I'm just finding people, you know, some people are more have a better sense of direction than others. But the point is that
they can sense out a river,
so create the setting matters, like that, the ambience of a place, the aesthetics of a place, the history of a place. We've got all those things that work in our favour. We need to make sure then that whatever we do there complements that, and there's no reason why housing can't do that. I think one of the most recent developments in the centre of the town, which I thought has done a really nice job of what they did, is the old Pets at Home store that was knocked down, and they've sort of I don't know how you would, if it's politically correct to call it, like sort of retirement type homes now, but they're essentially, you know, homes positioned to people of an older generation, but they've been done very nicely. It looks really nice. It's a very nice, sympathetic development in the centre of town. And actually that brings disposable income. It brings people that, you know, will shop and use the town, the cafes and stuff like that. Now, I'm not saying that that's what we should be completely replicated at the Riverside Shopping Centre on that site, but you need a mix because that's just important. And also commercially you need a mix because it creates different revenue streams. And that's also really important. But just to go back on one point as well, is what everyone also is forgetting is we talk about, you know, as councils, maybe are they commercially minded? Well, Wychavon probably is one of the most commercially minded councils that we've got in the country, or it's certainly one of the most entrepreneurial. We have done things over the last couple of decades which have been absolutely revolutionary in the way that we generate income for our residents and for the district and for the amenities it creates. Waitrose, moving the fire station down and building the Waitrose in Evesham, building the hospital in Pershore. We've done the Waitrose in Droitwich too. Those are buildings that are let back and leased back to Waitrose. They've got long leases. The Waitrose effect is real. You know, it's well documented. You know, talk about the broken window theory. The Waitrose effect is really real as well. And that definitely, you know, Waitrose, I remember when it first opened, and I think probably everyone does, and it felt quiet. You know, initially it didn't feel as busy as people thought it, or I thought it might be. Now you go there, it is buzzing. Waitrose, any time of the day, it's busy. It's busy.
Ain't no party like a Waitrose party.
Exactly.
Get yourself down there.
But
Saturday.
It's itself is a destination, isn't it? You come to Waitrose. Yeah. If you fancy something a bit special, you go to Waitrose, like because you know they're going to have a special ingredient or whatever else. But that was because Wychavon had the money to do it and the foresight to do it. And, you know, this is the other thing about purchasing the Riverside Shopping Centre and some of the things that we do in the district is because we have been really good with the way that we've managed our assets, our money. And that means that we can make these bold decisions to purchase a shopping centre with a you know, sort of national body like New Homes England and then look for a commercial partner. I find it hard to try and. I mean, you obviously they're championing the Conservative-led. Yeah, I never said the word Conservative, but it's you that said it. But I'll take it. I'll take it.
But you can tell when you're talking about it because you kind of raise in volume and tone. Yeah,
we all get taught that at politician school, don't we?
Oh yeah. I mean, yeah, like, you know, undoubtedly, investment at our council helps support the council tax and helps support the ventures such as the Riverside, which wouldn't be viable if it wasn't for those parts. So I have to say I agree, obviously, with all of that.
We can all see how painful it is for you to have to do that, Craig. So don't worry.
It's painful. Yes, we've got the Waitrose. Yes, that's bringing some of that demographic back. But this shopping centre will definitely, over time, as it starts to unfold, as we start to see images of what it's going to look like, when we start to see the offering, it's going to start drawing those people back, and we're going to get some pride back in this town. Because, you know, if this space gets improved, if this space, as we are told, with the hopes and the dreams and the wants from our council to bring it into new ownership, to bring it into our public ownership, to bring this wealth of an offering to our town, it will uplift the space. It'll be driving investment purely, and it's just in its existence as a regenerated space. But you're going to get behind the project and you're going to engage with the council on it, and you're going to start talking up the town and start saying, well, actually, yeah, it's been pretty dire over the past decade, but actually, unlike other towns, we've got an answer now. We've got a solution. This, for me, is like a really pivotal time, because I, for one, as you've known from my previous podcast, have been very critical about our town and how it looks and feels. And it's always from the standpoint that we haven't heard anything tangible about how it's going to be repaired, how it's going to be fixed. But now we actually do. And so the time to be cynical about it is keep a close eye on what's going on and voice your criticism at it, but don't just poo-poo the whole project because, I need something else to be cynical about now. I don't know.
Well, I think
I've gone off on one. I've got to come down off my soapbox now.
So you're doing my job for me, but the reality is it's taken a really long time to get to this place, and it's seeing is believing. That's really important. So I think demolishing it would actually be quite an important step, because that's evidence that things are progressing. Hopefully, the fact that we had that engagement event a few weeks ago, and we really, we had some mood boards, is what it could look like. I understand all of that, but the point I want to make is the cynicism I think comes from when people stand up, and as politicians especially, and sort of overpromise and underdeliver, which is unfortunately the state of most politics that we live in this country. The reality is Wychavon and the councillors, because we all voted for it. These things have had to go through votes at the council, and from what I remember, they were voted on unanimously, and that's across all political spectrums. But yeah, the reality is I could stand here now and I could be looking for re-election, say next year, and I could sit here and I could go, we're going to get a bowling alley, we're going to get a Nando's, we're going to have penthouses and all this type of stuff. That would be wrong, because I don't know that. As individuals, as councillors, we won't benefit from this. Is bigger than,
obviously, if you're living in a town,
of course, but we will. But Wychavon's a big district. It goes all the way up to Droitwich. That's a long way. You're talking like at least an hour from one end of the district to the other. It's a big district. It's a long district, and you could argue why people in Droitwich care about Evesham and vice versa.
We have to consider as well, also when LGR, local government review, the boundary is going to be massive. Yeah. It's going to be potentially incorporating Malvern Hills, Wychavon and Worcester City at best, or at worst case to also include Redditch, Wyre Forest and Bromsgrove.
Yeah. But I think the thing is, this sounds grandiose, but the sentiment as a point is that like great things happen when people plant trees of which a shade they're not going to benefit from, and this is one type of. Yeah, I know it sounds a bit. It's a quote from something I can't remember, but I think it's a really good point, and I think that's what politics is missing. Honestly, is actually so much self-interest sometimes is included in politics about what's in it for me. This project is about what's in it for our town and the success of our town, future of our town. In 30 years, I hope that we look back on what we do here now as something that's really built the town's sort of self-belief, its ambitions. It's been that catalyst for development that we all hope it will be, and change. But no one will remember necessarily that I or Wychavon had anything to do with it. But that's the point. It shouldn't be like that.
A brass kind of statue.
It's not part of the plan.
I thought we were going to call it the Charlie Homer Centre.
Oh God, don't say things like that. Jesus. But
what would you like to see? What would you like to see? Well, you've talked about independent shops. I mean, what would you like to see? I
just think that people want an experience, and when people now, and I know when I've got a young family, 2 young kids. If I go out, I want to think, what can I do for a few hours? I don't want to think about getting, moving a small army, or what it feels like moving a small army to go out for like 15 minutes sort of coffee and cake. I want to think, what else can I do? I can get a nice coffee and cake. I can walk along the river. My kids can go and play in the park. I could maybe on a Sunday afternoon listen to some nice music in the bandstand. On the way home, I can stop at the market square and, have a beer or have some food. I'm looking for to go and enjoy my town. But I think those reasons are there. Personally, and again, people go, "Oh, of course you do." Whatever, be cynical. The reality is the last weekend when we had all that sunshine down in the Abbey Park with the sunshine and everything else, it was lovely down there. There's people from all over the place. Then walked up, had a beer in stirrups and whatever, and walked home. We made a day, and I didn't have to get in the car. My kids were happy because they had things to entertain them, and apart from a beer and an ice cream, it didn't cost me anything.
Yeah.
And I think
It's-
that's what we're
it's-
looking for.
It's all about community, isn't it? And I think like they're not really shopping centres anymore; they're community spaces, and that's what we need to lean into. You know, it's a reason to get out. I mean, we've got the work from home culture. You know, I mean, I work from home, and I crave just popping into town to grab a coffee on the off chance that I'm either going to meet someone new or see someone I do know and have a quick catch up with them and just have a bit of a dose of something outside of my four walls. That's really important for well-being. And of course, if I'm in town, I'm buying a coffee, I might be buying lunch, I might be picking up something out of a shop that I wasn't expecting to buy. You're in the space, you've been brought in there by the attraction of the offering. And I think, of course, you up the offering like we are, hopefully, with the Riverside, and you'll attract more people to want to come in. I mean, it amazes me how we don't have a Michelin star restaurant here in Evesham, because we're the home of market growing. I mean, the produce that we grow here in and around the Vale is world class. I mean, Gordon Ramsay, you know, he's claimed that he gets his asparagus from here in Evesham. So why don't we have a Michelin star restaurant here? You know, we should do. I mean, we've got some great restaurants, of course, by the way, and some great cafes and eateries and what have you already. But we can bring more in. I think I want to see lots more of that. I do want to see a smidge of national offering in the space, and I would like to see, as you've said, like a leisure offering. And of course, the bowling alley gets bandied around a lot. I did speak to one of the officers at Wychavon the other day. I won't say the figure because I'm sure that might be announced at some point, but there was in the hundreds of responses in such a short amount of time about what people would like to see. And I think it's really important to bring up here that the council are not going to they're not going to go and say, hey, we're going to bring that Nando's in or that bowling alley in, and we can't pick and choose as a council what we want. I know you mentioned earlier how I would like to do that. I would love to do that. I'd love to go and pick and choose what brands we could bring into the town. But we can't do that. But like you say, we can make a space that is attractive for that. And of course, I think also the commercial partners that we bring in will affect that as well, because they probably come with an offering themselves. They'll probably come with connections to certain brands. So obviously that partner is really...
Yeah, but you know, a good example, have you ever been to Dunkerton's in Cheltenham?
Maybe. Where's that?
So Dunkerton's is like, it's outside of Cheltenham.
I'm so Evesham, Charlie. I don't like to venture too far out of town. You know,
it's 10 minutes outside of Cheltenham, and it's got like a bar and stuff like that. But around basically there, they've got sort of 6 or 7 food concessions, where so you can get everything from a pizza, Chinese, or whatever. Like, wouldn't that be amazing? Like, so sort of micro brands, you know, where they're not having to commit to a huge sort of, actually it's a shared restaurant, so you can eat, as long as you're eating from one of those places, you can share the space and
Digbeth dining club kind of thing.
Something like that. I think that vibe to me, I think, and it goes back to the market produce of the town and all that sort of stuff, those sort of things. And I think then it's about opportunity, isn't it? And I think it's all about, we have to look at this space not as we wanted it to be 20 years ago, but what we want it to be now and in another 20 years. And it has to be a space then that can evolve. The problem with the shopping centre was that some of the units were so big, nobody ever wanted to let them. It was just a challenge. The landlords wanted a certain amount of money, the business rates were a certain amount of money, and for all the schemes that would have been there to help support new businesses, etc., sometimes these things just don't work out. So it needs to be something that's dynamic, that changes, that shifts, and that allows for societal, cultural changes as well. Otherwise, it's not going to be effective. But the reality is this is now the moment that we have those conversations, and that's why a commercial partner is so important, because we need somebody that's got the expertise, who's done this before, who's got the sort of, the mobile number of the person who might make that decision at Nando's, and they might have that conversation. Some of that stuff we'll never know about, but some of the stuff that where that leads to, and the potential it leads to, and the things that come from it, will be something that I think is really, really exciting. And I think it is exciting. I really do understand why people, I'd like to see it happen tomorrow. It's the summer already. I want to see it happening. But the roundhouse those works are almost completing now, and hopefully the scaffolding will be down sort of midsummer. That will be down, midsummer, but definitely should be coming down soon, hopefully, because the work should be completed. And getting the market square back and having that feeling again of like pride in place. And even if we know that the shopping centre today isn't what we want it to be, hopefully the feeling of knowing that it will be eventually what we want it to be, bringing the public hall back into use, will be an amazing thing to do. I mean, it's been beset by challenges because of how the fact it's so listed and it's in a state of dilapidation. But
important to recognise that will stay, that building.
Oh yeah,
on the Market Square.
that whole facade will stay, which is brilliant, because it creates that whole aesthetic for the Market Square, which gives it that unique atmosphere, and part of the reason why people come and visit. Our twin town of Dreux, the like under 16s rugby team visited last weekend and played against our under 16s, and they were here for the whole weekend. They spent a whole day walking around going to the different places, and like that. Okay, they can go into the Almonry, but they stand outside the Almonry visiting the sort of, and there's a load of history there that people want to see, want to sort of engage with. So I think it's important. It's how we mix the old and the new, and how we embrace that opportunity. But now we're there. We know the people that are in charge. We've met the project managers. Rebecca was giving presentations at the engagement evening. You know who the councillors are. We're all here. We're all ears, and we're good. We understand that people want to know when we do what's happening, and as much as we can do that, we will make sure that message gets out and shared. But so much of it will be in the public domain, because the fact is, you can't knock a building down without a demolition order, and that's going to have to go through the planning process. Even though we are Wychavon District Council and it'll be us that is applying to do that work, it still has to go through the same rigorous process of going through officers and being analysed and checked and making sure it's a sound plan.
Consultations as well.
Consultations, yeah, exactly. Residents involved, exactly.
If listeners want to go to the Wychavon website, there is a whole page dedicated to the timeline of events, what has happened so far to get to this point. Lots of information on there, so definitely worth visiting that, because, as we say, for those that did attend the engagement event, communication will be key here, and there will be lots of information coming, and that site will have the most up-to-date information as well. Couple of last points, really. We talked about the public hall coming back into use. Absolutely. The Market Square being a real key place for community, live music, food, drink, bringing people together, of course, flowing through to the Bell Court. I would also like to see, we mentioned about working from home earlier. I'm really keen for a space that I can go and work from, hot desk from, but I'm keen I could do that right now. I could go to any number of places that's got fast internet and a couple of businesses there. I want to go somewhere that attracts me. I want to go somewhere that's got creative kind of businesses, that I can lean into, be inspired by, and I'm not. This is probably be sounding a bit kind of like creatively snobby, but it's just that my business is in the creative industry. We work with UX designers, website designers, illustrators, photographers, videographers. And most office spaces are set up for more corporate businesses. There's absolutely a need for that space. Of course there is. But for me personally, and I know many others, particularly youthful graduates coming out of university, what have you, they want to lean into that creative space. So for me, I want to really see a space that incubates, entrepreneurs, businesses. And of course, if those businesses are successful, they stay in the town, they're bringing clients to the town. And what are they doing when they're here? Working from the town centre spaces, that they're going out for lunch, they're getting coffees, they're going out for beer, getting drinks, getting food after work. And for me, that is a really key part of replacing that retail aspect of our town and bringing in a different use case, really. So I am really pushing hard for that. I think the main thing is that right now we genuinely do have prospects for the town. We genuinely do have an anything could go situation right now. Let's not try and fill these gaps. There will be gaps in communication whilst these things are all unfolding. Let's not fill those gaps with cynicism and negativity. My new saying, you're going to hear it a lot, is that whilst buildings can create a space, it is people that make a place. And really, this is the key part of this journey, because the buildings are going to change for the better. Are you behind it? What are you doing? Because it really is down to the townspeople now to drive that narrative, the wider narrative that people online from afar are seeing about our town. And are we behind it? And are we really proud of what our town could become? Because we've got to build it ourselves. At the end of the day, we all live here. It's part of us. The town is us. We reflect what the town is and what it means to live here. So I think that's really key as a takeaway. So yeah, Charlie, do you want any last words before?
Well, how do I add to that? What was it? The place? What is it saying? Are we going to see that on a leaflet near you soon, or what?
Buildings make a space, people make a place, and that will be on my campaign material.
Very good. Very good. Yeah. I think, for all of our political differences, Craig, what we absolutely agree on, and I think everyone does agree on, regardless of, is we all know that there are a few things that could unlock Evesham's potential. Knocking down the Riverside Shopping Centre and creating something there that we all know is possible is one of the best ways to do that. So I'm really excited about it. My job as a councillor, for as long as I am a councillor, is to make sure that we keep that momentum up and we don't lose track of that. But I don't see why we would. But that's what I'm here to do. And I want to see it happen. And even if whatever comes to me or in the past, in the future, Evesham's my home. I've made this my home. My family, this is where we live. I care about it. I'm always going to care about it, and I'm always going to want to have a degree of a say or certainly be involved with how we make it the place that we want it to be. That idea of if we all just got behind it and we all just share just to have a bit more sort of just a sprinkle of hope, because that's what this project allows us to do, is hope for something different, then I think we'll all be a bit happier and in a better place by the point that we get to the sort of knocking it down and restarting it all over again.
100%. And absolutely fine for anybody to be kind of obviously asking questions and holding people to account. That's part of it, but don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Is that what they say? I don't know.
That's a good example.
Was that a good example? We'll go with it. Anyway, well, thanks for everybody for listening to this project. We will no doubt be picking this back up again in a few more podcasts, no doubt, because it will continue to evolve. Any questions you want to ask, you are welcome to put them down in any of the comments. If there's anything that you want to suggest that we talk about, do that as well. So until then, thanks for listening. Charlie?
Thank you very much. Take care.